So we're left with this error, HTTP client, no provider. So what we in fact need to do is essentially go into our routing definitions. So we have our app routes. And because we're using HTTP client inside of our admin module, we essentially don't have any provider because the service is provided in the root. So if we jump into our donut service, we have this provided in the root, which is then providing it in the root injector. Now we don't actually have this. So the way that we need to fix this is by introducing the concept of a scoped provider, and we want to provide it only to our admin routes. After this line of code, we have our path, load children, our lazy loaded code split module is then loaded into play. When we hit our admin path, we need to then set up another providers, and we need to ask for our HTTP client module. So go ahead, hit enter, make sure this has been imported from Angular. Now, like before, we need to use this import providers from and pass in our HTTP client module. This is essentially providing our HTTP client in the same way that an ng module would, but we're providing it on the root level, which makes it then available to us inside any services that are registered here. So this means we need to, in fact, register our donut service. So go ahead and type donut service. Make sure this is then imported at the top. I like to just create a space between these, all the Angular logic and then my application logic. We can then hit save, and we can start to see our application springing into life. What's interesting here is our application is in fact fully working. So you can see the incremental approach that we could take with our standalone components is we don't need to have things completely erroring across our whole application, and we can migrate things module by module. So I like to call this a scoped provider because let's say we had another routing definition where, for example, we had a path and another module called the menu module, for example. If we didn't have these providers inside of here, our menu module wouldn't be able to access our donut service. So this is nice and explicit, and it allows us to then create these, what I like to call scoped providers, and we do this via the routing definitions. So the next step for us is to start moving away from this admin module, and instead of admin module, we're going to change this over to admin routes. Again, we're going to have admin.module, rename this file entirely to admin.routes, and this is just going to allow us to then pass in an entire routing definition exactly in the same way that we've done here, and have a nice, simple, clean file with just the routing definitions. So let's save this out. We'll introduce some errors. Inside of our admin module, what I'm going to do is just simply comment this out for now. What we're going to do is rename this to our admin routes. We can then save this out, rename our file across to admin.routes. So jumping back into our app routes, we have our admin.routes file, which when we hit save gives us a refresh, and we then hit some future errors. Now these are all related to our standalone APIs. You can see that we are trying to access things such as $event, and Angular is telling us that there are some severe problems with our application. However, we should fully expect these, and we can then work out in the next couple of lessons how to go ahead and fix them all. Now, what I like about this approach is we do not have to use this router module .forChild. Inside of our main, we're using router module .forRoot and passing in our app routes, but the router has had some configuration changes, which allows us to easily load the routing definitions by just passing in this load children. Now this is really nice because inside of our admin routes, everything is then scoped. So this allows us to load our entire routing definition from another module in a standalone fashion. So with this in mind, we have some errors to fix in the next couple of lessons. So let's carry on and get refactoring.